It started with a lie, and one accidental kiss that changed everything. She was a broke Ph.D. student. He was the most feared professor in the department. They were never meant to fall in love, but science has never been great at predicting the human heart. Olive Smith didn't cry often, but that day, standing alone and overwhelmed in a dim bathroom on Stanford's campus, tears burned her eyes, not because of heartbreak or failure, but because she'd made the questionable choice to wear expired contact lenses. Yes, 2 years expired, cheap contacts, the kind that turned her vision into a watery blur and her eyes into a battlefield. That, and she was questioning everything: grad school, science, her future. Then his voice, deep, smooth, unexpected. "Is there a reason you're crying in my restroom?" A shadowy figure, tall and composed, stood in the doorway. Olive could barely make him out, but his presence was undeniable. Dark clothes, deep voice, confident stance. It was clear. This wasn't the ladies' room after all. And this man, whoever he was, wasn't just anyone. Despite the situation, red eyes, runny nose, misused restroom, they talked, bantered even. She confessed she was a Ph.D. candidate interviewing for Stanford's biology department. He was already part of it. He didn't offer his name, but his voice carried authority and experience. When she shared her fears about not being good enough, about academia chewing her up and spitting her out, he didn't feed her comforting lies. He asked a simple, grounding question: "Why do you want to get a Ph.D.?" And Olive's answer was raw and real. Not for prestige, not for a job, but because she had a research question, one she didn't trust anyone else to answer. Because it mattered to her. When she left that bathroom, she still didn't know his name, but the stranger's words lingered. They sparked something. And when Stanford offered her a place, she accepted. Nearly 3 years later, Olive's life in grad school was fine, busy, underpaid, emotionally draining. She had her work, her friends Anne and Malcolm, and a fragile balance of lab chaos and caffeine dependency. But there was one problem. Her best friend, Anne, was in love with Jeremy, Olive's very recent ex, and Anne was too good a friend to pursue him, no matter how clearly Jeremy liked her. So Olive, desperate to convince Anne she'd moved on, told her a lie. A simple, harmless lie. "I'm dating someone." Anne lit up with joy. Olive regretted it immediately, because now, to prove it, Olive had to be on a date, which meant sitting in the lab late at night, pretending to work, hoping Anne wouldn't call her bluff, until Olive saw her friend headed straight toward her in the hallway. Panic. Pure, blinding panic. And then Olive turned, grabbed the first man she saw, and kissed him hard. It was awkward. Olive's chin tilted up painfully to meet his height, and her brain screamed that she'd lost her mind. But then he kissed her back, slowly, gently. His hands settled at her waist. His mouth matched hers with quiet surety, and her anxiety stilled, until she opened her eyes and realized she'd just kissed Dr. Adam Carlson. Adam Carlson was infamous. Brilliant, yes, but terrifying. He shredded people's dissertations in front of entire seminar rooms. He was known for impossible standards, dry sarcasm, and a general aura of "get away from me." Olive's roommate Malcolm called him the destroyer of hopes and dreams, and Olive had just made out with him in the hallway. Adam's face stoic, unreadable, looked down at her. "Did you just kiss me?" She tried to deny it, but the damage was done. When she explained, stammering, desperate, a story about her friend and her fake dating lie, Adam stared at her like she was a new species under a microscope. Then he nodded, calm as ever. "I'll file the Title IX complaint in the morning." She panicked again, begged, apologized, assured him she meant no harm. He seemed to find her embarrassment almost amusing. And when she finally fled down the hallway, her heart racing, her cheeks burning, she didn't hear him call out after her, "Olive." He knew her name. The next few days at Stanford felt off. People stared, whispered, smiled knowingly. Olive tried to ignore it until her friend Anne pulled her aside, eyes wide. "Was that Adam Carlson I saw you kissing the other night?" Busted. Olive did what any panicked person would do. She doubled down. "Yes, we're dating." Anne looked stunned. "But why?" "He's terrifying." Olive said something vague about how he was secretly nice. Not her best lie, but Anne seemed to buy it, and more importantly, she seemed to consider Jeremy back on the table. But that one lie had grown legs. Now everyone thought Olive and Adam were a thing. Jeremy stared at her awkwardly in the coffee shop. A postdoc offered her a microscope slot out of the blue. Even Dr. Aslan, her advisor, suddenly seemed concerned about Olive's well-being. It didn't take long before her friend Malcolm cornered her in the bathroom. "You're dating Carlson?" he demanded. The story had spread like wildfire. Olive had no choice. She stormed into Adam's lab into the lion's den and asked to speak with him privately. In the conference room, she explained everything. The lie, the gossip, the social chaos. "I just wanted my friend to be happy," she said, voice small. Adam listened, arms crossed, calm as ever, unbothered by the swirling storm around them. Then he did the unthinkable. He proposed a solution. Let's fake it, a fake relationship. Him and her. For his own reasons too. Stanford's administration was withholding his research funds, worried he wasn't socially stable enough to stick around. A visible relationship might reassure them. They'd help each other. 1 month, public hand-holding, coffee dates, occasional smiles, just enough to make it seem real. Olive hesitated. But then she remembered. And remembered her dwindling lab budget. Remembered how convincing her story had become, and she agreed. They established ground rules. No real feelings. No physical intimacy other than public hand-holding and smiles. Closing parenthesis. No jealousy. No drama. Just pretend they'd date in public, but keep real life separate. It should have been easy. They weren't friends, weren't even close. She was a third-year grad student. He was a tenured professor with an intimidating scowl and a stare that could wither bone. But Adam showed up to their first fake coffee date right on time. He paid for her drink. He held the door open. He even listened. And somehow Olive, who wasn't supposed to like him, who told herself this was all just a temporary lie, started to notice little things, like the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way he didn't interrupt, the way he walked beside her, not ahead. The line between fake and real began to blur. And Olive? She was in deeper trouble than she realized. Fake dating. It sounded simple in theory, hypothetically, even. But Olive soon learned that pretending to date Adam Carlson in public came with unexpected complications. For starters, Adam was infuriatingly punctual. When they agreed to meet at the campus coffee shop, he was already there, already ordered, and already sipping his drink when she arrived. Breathless and late, he stood when he saw her. Stood. Who did that anymore? They talked about their research, about her work on pancreatic cancer detection, and his on some deeply complex molecular biology that Olive barely understood. And to their mutual surprise, the conversation flowed effortlessly. As they walked across campus, people stared hard. Jeremy looked like he was trying not to cry. A random TA tripped over his own shoelaces. One professor actually did a double take, and then without prompting, without warning, Adam reached out and took her hand. Olive blinked up at him, confused. "People are watching," he said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She squeezed his hand back. From that day forward, the sightings began. Olive and Adam at the campus food truck. Olive and Adam walking out of the lab late at night. Olive and Adam sharing whispered conversations by the vending machines. People talked, but no one dared say anything to Adam Carlson's face. Malcolm, of course, had a million questions. Is it real? Are you in love? Are you secretly writing a rom-com? Olive deflected with jokes and sarcasm, though she couldn't deny that something was happening. Something small but persistent, because despite his terrifying reputation, Adam was considerate, quiet, surprisingly funny when he let his guard down, and when he walked her home one evening, still holding her hand, she realized something even more dangerous. She liked being with him, liked the rhythm of his voice, the warmth of his hands, the way he made her feel seen even when she wasn't saying anything at all. It was getting harder and harder to remember that none of it was real. But life wasn't just fake dating and awkward butterflies. Olive's research had hit a wall. Her lab lacked the resources to continue the next phase of her project, and her advisor, Dr. Aslan, would be retiring soon. Her only hope: find a lab, any lab with the right equipment, funding, and interest in pancreatic cancer biomarkers. Olive did what desperate Ph.D. students do. She emailed professors across the country. Only one wrote back: Dr. Tom Benton, a Harvard researcher. Big name, big lab, big deal. He said her project sounded good. He'd be visiting Stanford soon for a collaboration. They could talk then. It was her best chance, maybe her only chance. Meanwhile, The department was buzzing about a prestigious biology conference just weeks away. Olive had submitted an abstract. If accepted, she'd present a poster on her work, perhaps even catch the attention of more big names like Dr. Benton. But before the conference, each student had to give a practice talk in front of faculty and peers, and Olive, public speaking was her nemesis. The night before, she practiced alone in the lab until nearly midnight, stuttering through slides, stumbling over her words, and then, as if conjured by stress itself, Adam appeared. He didn't laugh, didn't criticize. He sat, he listened, he offered calm, direct feedback. "You know this material, Olive," he said. "Just say it like you would in conversation." Then quietly, "You're better than you think you are. It shouldn't have mattered. It was fake. All of it was fake." But Olive went home that night with a small, blooming warmth in her chest. The next day, Olive stood at the podium, palms sweating, staring out at rows of Ph.D. students, postdocs, and professors. Jeremy sat in the second row beside Anne, who smiled encouragingly. Malcolm gave her a dramatic thumbs up. But it was Adam seated in the back, arms crossed, focused entirely on her, who gave her the calm she needed. She began to speak, and to her own surprise, the words came out steady, clear, passionate. She knew this work. She believed in it, and for once, it showed. When she finished, the room burst into polite applause. Even Adam nodded, a rare flicker of approval on his face. Olive exhaled slowly. She'd done it. That evening, with her nerves still buzzing, Olive found herself walking across campus with Adam. She hadn't brought her bike. The buses weren't running. Without a word, he offered her a ride. His car, sleek, black, spotlessly clean, fit him perfectly. They drove in comfortable silence until he pulled up outside her building. Before she got out, Olive hesitated. "Thanks for the ride and for everything." Adam looked at her, really looked at her. "You don't have to thank me, Olive." But she did. Because this fake thing they were doing, it was starting to feel real. Too real. And it was starting to scare her. When Dr. Benton arrived at Stanford the following week, Olive was ready. She wore her best button-up shirt, practiced her talking points, rehearsed her project explanation to perfection. They met in a quiet lab lounge. Benton smiled, shook her hand, and leaned back as she walked him through her research. He was charming, friendly, receptive. "I've read your paper," he said. "It's good work, Olive. Really promising. And I'm glad to see someone so young working on early detection." She lit up. He continued. "But you know how it is. Funding's tight. Space is limited. I'll talk to my team. See if we can fit you in." Hope. Real, tangible hope. As he stood to leave, Adam appeared at the door. "Tom," he said, surprised. "Adam." Benton smiled. "Didn't know you were still here. Olive and I were just talking shop." The two men shook hands, clearly old acquaintances, colleagues, maybe even friends, and Olive, standing between them, felt a chill creep up her spine, because suddenly, this wasn't just research anymore. These weren't just colleagues. Something about Adam's expression, tight-lipped, controlled, told her he wasn't entirely thrilled with Tom's presence, and Olive couldn't shake the feeling that there was history between them. Unspoken, complicated. The days that followed blurred together. More coffee dates. More walks, more accidental brushes of hands that lasted a second too long. The conference was coming up fast, and Olive's poster had been accepted. She was going to present in Boston, with Adam attending too. She was nervous, excited, and very, very aware that the boundary between their fake dating agreement and the emotions brewing under the surface was thinning. Worse, Anne and Jeremy had finally gotten together. They were adorable, perfect, and entirely thanks to Olive's lie, which meant Olive had to keep up the act, even as she caught herself watching Adam when he wasn't looking, even as her heart started to beat faster when he said her name, even as she realized the terrible, undeniable truth: she was falling for him. The biology conference in Boston was a big deal. It was Olive's first time presenting at such a prestigious event, and she was both thrilled and petrified. Her nerves fluttered as she rolled her poster tube through the hotel lobby, heart pounding in rhythm with her steps. And then she saw Adam, tall, poised, entirely at ease in a sleek black jacket, coffee in hand. He didn't see her at first, but the moment he did, his expression softened, just slightly, but enough to make her breath hitch. He came over, took her heavy bag without asking. "I'll carry it," he said. Simple, efficient, so very Adam. And Olive, whose heart had no business leaping, Let it. The trouble began at the check-in desk. Olive's room, booked through the university's glitchy system, had vanished into the ether. No reservation, no backup, and every other hotel nearby was fully booked because of the conference. She was stranded, until Adam stepped in. "She's with me," he told the clerk, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Add her to my reservation." Olive blinked. "Wait. What?" But it was too late. A key card was pressed into her hand. Her name was on the booking. Adam had just made her his hotel roommate. She followed him up to the room in a daze. Inside, it was spacious but intimate. One king-size bed, no couch, one bathroom. Olive stared at the bed, then back at him. Adam raised an eyebrow. "I'll sleep on the floor." She opened her mouth to protest, but the exhaustion of travel, stress, and presentation prep weighed down her words. "Okay," she whispered, and somehow, they both ended up sitting on opposite sides of the bed, watching muted cable news in silence, the air between them heavy with things unsaid. The next day, Olive stood by her research poster, fingers clenched around her handouts, scanning the crowd. Her stomach twisted with nerves. Then Tom Benton approached. He looked friendly, supportive. He praised her poster again, nodded thoughtfully, said, "We'll be in touch," and then he walked away, leaving Olive with a surge of hope and adrenaline. But Adam's expression, as he watched Tom from across the room, was anything but hopeful. That night, Olive and Adam returned to the hotel late. Their room was dim, quiet, the tension between them crackling. She thanked him again for everything, for letting me crash here, for standing by me, for all of this. Adam turned to her, dark eyes searching. "You don't have to thank me, Olive. I like helping you." Her breath caught, and then softly, like it barely wanted to be heard, "You're important to me." The silence that followed was loud, loud enough to drown out her heartbeat, loud enough to make her wonder if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't pretending anymore. But she said nothing, because it couldn't be real, could it? The next morning, Olive woke early and slipped downstairs to grab coffee before her panel. She didn't expect to run into Tom Benton again. He greeted her like an old friend and asked about dinner plans. When she laughed nervously, trying to deflect, his eyes narrowed. "You know," he said, leaning closer, "you're smart. You're attractive. That can open doors in academia. You just have to be willing to let them." Olive froze. The flattery turned sleazy, the compliments laced with condescension. His tone, so different now, dripped with implication. "You know what I mean," he added, a smirk on his face. She backed away, made an excuse, escaped to the women's restroom with her heart thudding and her hands shaking. It wasn't just awkward, it was clear. Dr. Tom Benton was a predator, and he held her future in his hands. Olive didn't tell Adam, not right away, not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't sure how. What could she say? That the only professor who'd shown interest in her research had just propositioned her, that she now had to choose between her career and her dignity? So she buried it, smiled through it, presented at the panel like nothing had happened. But something had changed. She wasn't just pretending anymore. Not with her project, not with herself, and not with Adam. Their last night in Boston, they returned late, tired, worn. Olive went to brush her teeth while Adam changed behind the bathroom door. When she came back out, he was already on the floor, blankets arranged neatly. "You don't have to sleep down there," she murmured. Adam looked up at her. Something raw flickered behind his usually steady gaze. "It's fine." She hesitated, then walked toward him, sat beside him on the carpet. "I want to thank you," she said softly, "for all of this. You didn't have to, but you did." "I did because I care about you, Olive." Her breath caught again. "You matter. You're not just a pretend girlfriend. Not to me." It hit her like a wave, a truth she'd been dodging, an ache she'd been ignoring. She was in love with him, completely, quietly, hopelessly, and it was breaking her heart, because she didn't know if any of it was real for him. They flew back to Stanford. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Their fake dating agreement still stood, their roles still intact, but Olive's heart wasn't pretending anymore. She avoided Adam, told herself it was to focus on her research, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. Then one afternoon in the lab lounge, Anne rushed in, eyes wide. "Olive, did you hear?" "Hear what?" "Tom Benton." Adam just confronted him, in front of Dr. Aslan. It was epic. I don't know what he said, but Tom left looking like he got punched. Olive's blood ran cold. Adam knew. Somehow he knew. After Boston, everything changed. Olive returned to her lab trying to pretend she hadn't fallen in love with Adam Carlson. She buried herself in data and mice and microscope slides, but her mind kept drifting to his voice, his touch, his quiet presence beside her in the dark. But rumors were swirling again. Rumors about Tom Benton. It seemed Adam hadn't stayed quiet after Boston. No, he'd done the one thing Olive hadn't dared. He spoke out, confronted Tom, quietly, with precision, with facts. Word spread that Benton's collaborators had begun to distance themselves, that a quiet investigation was underway. But Adam never told Olive, never asked if she was okay, never brought up Boston again. And that silence, it hurt. Then came the biology department mixer. Olive showed up late, in a black dress Malcolm insisted made her look devastatingly powerful. The moment she walked in, her eyes searched for Adam. He stood across the room, deep in conversation with a visiting professor. He hadn't seen her yet, but when he finally turned, his eyes found hers instantly. The world fell away, for one perfect second. Everything felt right, but then Tom Benton entered the room. He smiled that same smug smile, made a beeline for the refreshments, and pretended nothing had happened. As if he hadn't cornered Olive in a hotel hallway. As if he hadn't threatened her future with a wink and a whisper. And Olive froze. She couldn't do this. Couldn't stand in the same room as him while pretending to be fine. Couldn't keep playing pretend with Adam, either, not when every look, every touch, every heartbeat felt so real. She fled the room, escaping to the cool night air. And behind her, footsteps. Adam followed her outside, always calm, always in control. But tonight, his expression was stormy. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I had work," she murmured. He stepped closer. "You're lying." Olive's breath caught. She could feel it, the truth trying to claw its way out of her chest. But saying it out loud meant risking everything. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "Do what?" "This, us, pretending. It's not helping anyone anymore." Adam's brow furrowed. "You're not pretending." She froze. "What?" He looked down at her, eyes dark and unguarded. "You're not pretending." "Neither am I." The air shifted. Everything shifted. "I've been in love with you for a long time, Olive," he said quietly. "Before the kiss, before the coffee, before I even knew your name." She stared at him, breathless. "But you agreed to fake it. Why?" "I thought it was the only way to be near you." Her eyes filled with tears. Because it was everything she'd wanted to hear, everything she'd secretly dreamed. But it was too late. Olive didn't sleep. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words again and again. But by morning, her decision was made. She needed to end it for real this time. In the lab the next day, she pulled Adam aside. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled. "I can't do this anymore," she said again. "Even if you weren't pretending, I was. I told myself it was fake so I wouldn't fall for you. But I did, and now I don't know what's real." Adam didn't try to stop her. He just looked at her with that quiet ache in his eyes and nodded. "I want you to be happy, Olive. Even if it's not with me." Olive spent the next few days in a fog. Her research stalled. Her emails piled up. Malcolm and Anne hovered anxiously. But she couldn't bring herself to talk about it. Then at the worst possible time, she was summoned to speak at a departmental panel about women in STEM. Anne was hosting, and Olive couldn't say no. She stood at the podium, blinking under the harsh lights, and tried to speak, tried to pretend she was fine. But then someone asked a question about harassment in academia, and suddenly, her voice cracked. "I was harassed," she said, her voice shaking, "by someone I trusted, a professor I looked up to." Gasps rippled through the room, whispers, a silence heavy with shock. She looked up and saw Adam in the back row, watching, frozen, listening. He implied that if I wanted his support, I had to. Her voice broke again. "I said no, but I'm still scared of what it will cost me." The words hung in the air like thunderclouds. And for the first time, Olive felt the weight lift. Because it was out, it was real. She wasn't hiding anymore. The applause that followed was quiet at first, then thunderous. Everything unraveled quickly after that. Tom Benton's name surfaced in every hallway. His reputation, once untouchable, began to crumble. Olive's testimony gave others the courage to come forward. Students, postdocs, even a faculty member. Dr. Aslan filed a formal report. Collaborations were dropped. Harvard launched an investigation, and through it all Adam stood by her. From a distance, silent, respectful, waiting. Weeks passed. Olive's research finally moved forward. Another lab local, well-respected, offered her a place to continue her work on biomarkers. Her panel testimony sparked a larger conversation across the department. Policies were revisited. Harassment protocols improved. Her courage became a catalyst. But Olive's heart remained bruised until the day she walked into the break room and found a note tucked under her coffee mug. "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never stop hoping you do." Ash stared at it, heart hammering. Adam, still waiting, still hoping, and something inside her cracked open because she realized she didn't want to pretend anymore. The note stayed in Olive's backpack. For days, she carried it everywhere, pulled it out between experiments, read it before bed, traced the letters with her finger like they might offer clarity. "You don't have to forgive me, but I'll never stop hoping you do." It haunted her, not because she was angry, not really, but because she was scared. Scared that what she felt for Adam Carlson wasn't just a passing infatuation. Scared it was real, permanent, unstoppable, and she didn't know how to let herself want something that big. Until the day it rained. Hard, heavy, relentless rain. She'd forgotten her umbrella and left her raincoat in the lab. Typical .as she rushed across campus, drenched and shivering. She caught sight of him standing at the edge of the quad, completely soaked, holding a folder over his head like a makeshift shield, and suddenly, all that fear vanished. She ran straight toward him. "Adam." He turned, stunned, water dripping from his hair, his coat, his impossibly broad shoulders. "Olive, what are you doing out in this?" "I needed to find you." Her voice cracked, half from nerves, half from the cold. "Are you okay?" She nodded. I didn't say it before, and I should have. I didn't know how." His expression softened. He stepped closer, searching her face like she held every answer he'd ever wanted. She swallowed hard. "I love you." The words slipped out like a breath she'd been holding for weeks. "I think I've loved you since the first time I saw you. That night in the bathroom, you made me feel like I wasn't crazy for wanting to do something that mattered." Rain poured between them, but neither moved. "You never made me feel small, or dumb, or alone. You made me feel like I belonged." Tears mixed with rain, and she couldn't tell which was which. "I thought I had to fake everything to survive here, but with you, I didn't have to pretend." Adam's jaw tensed just slightly, and then he reached for her, slowly, like she might still run. "I love you too, Olive." And then finally he kissed her. Not like before. Not like the kiss in the hallway that had started this whole lie. This kiss was real, unhurried, steady, full of everything they hadn't said, full of everything they'd felt but tried to bury. Her arms wrapped around his neck. His hands pulled her close. The rain didn't matter. The past didn't matter. Only this, only them. They didn't say much after. They walked, side by side, back to her apartment, soaked to the bone but grinning like fools. He made her tea while she changed into dry clothes. She tossed him a hoodie. That was two sizes too small. He wore it anyway, and they sat on her tiny couch, knees touching, fingers entwined, watching dumb reality TV while pretending they weren't both terrified and thrilled that this was just the beginning. When he finally left that night, he kissed her forehead like it was sacred. Weeks passed, but this time everything felt lighter. Olive's research found its home in a collaborative lab, one that respected her ideas, supported her direction, and gave her the equipment she needed. Her early-stage pancreatic cancer screening study began moving forward again, and her advisors took notice. More than that, everyone noticed. The girl who'd once been a ghost in the hallway now stood tall beside one of the department's most feared professors, now, oddly, a bit less feared. Because he smiled now, sometimes, at her. She still couldn't believe it. They went on real dates, ate at real restaurants, held hands when no one was watching, and Olive started to truly believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have both things, love and science, because Adam never asked her to choose. He never asked her to be anything but herself. Late one night, in the biology building, they found themselves in that same hallway where it all began. She glanced at the spot where she'd kissed him the first time, heart fluttering. He followed her gaze and smiled. "Should I be worried? Are you planning to kiss another stranger?" Olive laughed. "No, you're it. One and done." He tilted his head, pretending to consider. "I could be convinced to let you kiss me again." "Oh, could you?" "I suppose." In the name of science. Olive stepped closer, smirking. "So we're testing a hypothesis?" "Exactly." She leaned up on her toes. Which one? Adam's voice was soft against her lips. That love can start from a single kiss, even when you think it's fake. And then she kissed him. Again and again and again, proving every part of that hypothesis absolutely, irrevocably true. 1 year later, lives was no longer filled with rejections, but invitations to conferences, collaborations. Her paper was accepted for publication. Her early detection biomarker showed promise in preliminary trials, her inbox views, and through it all, Adam stood beside her. A faculty mixer. Someone jokingly asked if they were still faking it. Adam pulled Olive close and said, "Not anymore." Olive just smiled, because her hypothesis had changed. From the farther I stay from love, the better off I'll be. To some risks are worth taking, especially the ones that scare you the most.